Hi, it's Amy Yee, and welcome back to Wired for Change. This is episode 5 in our Digital Transformation Dream Team series, Engineering Trust in Transformation. But first of all, since this is episode 5 of the Dream Team series, let me quickly bring you up to speed. In episode 1, the Innovation Playbook, Balancing Vision with Practical Execution, we talked about building a transformation team that balances foresight, information strategy, and decisive action. Now, we always map an archetype to a historical figure just to give a little bit of color and an example for the archetype that we define as someone who is helpful for this role within this episode. So, first of all, we define the futurist, someone who is a visionary with curiosity, imagination, and future orientation. And for the futurist, we picked Leonardo da Vinci. Secondly, in that episode, we talked about the information alchemist, someone who's data-driven, pattern-seeking, bridging logic and creativity. And for that, we picked Ada Lovelace. Thirdly, we talked about the closer, a powerful executor, strategic and politically astute, who can bring vision to life. And for the closer, we picked Catherine the Great. And so the idea is for each of these archetypes, you need to bring them onto your transformation dream team, or know who you're working with on other teams. Who is this person who can play this role and be this voice for you on the dream team? In episode 2, we talked about the human side of change, making transformation human, relational, and grounded in empathy and lived experience. First of all, we talked about the change whisperer, someone who is trusted, has lived experience, and can be the relational translator of change. And for that, we picked Harriet Tubman. Secondly, we talked about the empathy engineer, someone who can design with emotion and imagination for a better user experience. And for that, we picked Walt Disney. Thirdly, we talked about the change leader, someone who is inspiring, bold, and can be the unifying voice of progress and transformation. And for this, we picked John F. Kennedy. In episode 3, Architecture in Motion, Designing Systems for Change, we talked about how good architecture of systems, policies, and communication supports digital transformation. First of all, we talked about the systems orchestrator, someone who can be the master strategist of structure, governance, and cohesion. And for that, we picked Julius Caesar. The policy shaper, architect of policy systems with societal impact, such as universal healthcare. And for that, we picked Tommy Douglas. And then thirdly, we talked about the tech trailblazer, someone who can envision and implement new possibilities in real time. And for that, we picked Nikola Tesla. In the 4th episode, called Creating the Conditions for Adaptability, we focused on building flexibility, resilience, and momentum during uncertainty and change. First, we talked about the adaptive organization designer, someone who can redesign systems for performance, health, and learning in crisis. For that, we picked Florence Nightingale. Then we talked about the velocity catalyst, someone who can be your lean thinking pioneer, someone who enables flow, speed, and continuous improvement. And for that role, we picked Taiichi Ono. Thirdly, we talked about the strategic diplomat, someone who can really be an ambassador for change, someone who can really work very diplomatically across different groups, different units in your organization with external stakeholders. And for that, we picked Eleanor Roosevelt, who has embodied this in such a global context. So those were our first 4 episodes of the Dream Team series, all meant to help you identify the types of skills and characteristics that can help make your transformation successful. So back now to episode 5. If you've been in a transformation project recently, you know the drill. Everyone's excited about AI, cloud migration, big data platforms, until someone raises their hand and says, "What about cybersecurity?" Or someone asks, "Are we collecting more data than we need?" Or wonders, what if the system makes a mistake that no one can trace? Trust isn't just earned by your brand, it's engineered into your systems. In this episode, we're exploring 3 critical roles, and I've been eagerly awaiting this episode. Firstly, the cyber defender, who protects against evolving threats. Secondly, the trust guardian, who ensures that privacy and dignity are never afterthoughts. And then third, The Systems Steward, someone who thinks about not just what's happening now or what's going to happen on launch, but someone who thinks about the long-term effects of people, institutions, and systems, and what happens when they all come together. So for our first archetype, let's look at the cyber defender. And we've chosen Winston Churchill. When you think about Winston Churchill, cybersecurity might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but think again. Churchill was obsessed with fortification, with understanding the enemy's mind, and with defending systems, physical, operational, and psychological, from being overrun. And that's exactly the kind of mindset a modern transformation team needs from its cyber defender. Now, before we dive in, it's worth noting that Winston Churchill's legacy is complex. He was a pivotal wartime leader and a champion of innovation and resilience, but he also held views and made decisions that many today find deeply troubling, particularly related to colonial policy and race. In this series, when we align historical figures with archetypes, we're not suggesting uncritical hero worship. We're drawing from specific qualities or episodes in their lives that embody something useful for transformation today. For Churchill, that's his role as a wartime defender of systems under siege, which is a great metaphor for cybersecurity leadership in high-stakes environments. So let's look at why Churchill fits this role. First of all, the radar bet. In the lead up to the wartime in the Second World War, Britain was woefully unprepared for aerial attack, but Churchill supported a bold technological investment: radar. This system provided early warning of Luftwaffe attacks and allowed the RAF to be strategically deployed. Without it, the Battle of Britain could have ended very differently. That's a cyber defender mindset. Detect early, act quickly, build layered defense. Secondly, the Bletchley Park connection. Churchill gave explicit support to code-breaking operations at Bletchley Park, calling it his golden goose that never cackled. He authorized funding and protected the team from political interference. By doing so, he enabled Alan Turing and others to break the German Enigma code, giving the Allies a critical edge. This wasn't just about math, it was about building intelligence into defense strategy. Thirdly, strategic foresight and stubbornness. Churchill warned about Hitler while much of Europe was still chasing appeasement. His imperialist views and some of his colonial decisions remain deeply controversial, but in the context of defense against existential threat, his prescience mattered. Cybersecurity needs that same tension. People who can spot the gathering storm, challenge complacency, and fight for resilience, even when it's unpopular or expensive. So what does Churchill's example mean for your transformation team? The cyber defender could be a CISO or an IT security lead, but really, they're the advanced scout, the risk realist, the one who asks, what if this fails in production? What if a vendor's compromise becomes our compromise? What if our users are being phished right now? They don't wait for incidents to make the case. They build the case for defense while others are still celebrating pilot launch. Take the SolarWinds breach, a supply chain attack where malicious code was inserted into software updates, impacting thousands of organizations. Or the infiltration of critical infrastructure by Volt Typhoon, a PRC state-sponsored threat group that blends in using legitimate tools. These are Churchillian lessons. Anticipate, harden, monitor, be bold in defense, not just in innovation. The cyber defender archetype in your transformations is your transformation's watchtower and shield. They're the ones who stay alert while others relax, who understand that security isn't a feature, it's a foundation. When you hear someone say, we'll deal with that after launch, or it's not our job to worry about that, listen for the Churchill in the room. Make sure that you have a Churchill in the room. Because the ones who see the threat early are often the ones who save us later. I'm going to quote a movie. The problem with most people is that they don't believe something can happen until it's happened. It's human nature. That's from the movie World War Z, about zombie apocalypse, and it's one of my favorite movies. If you've seen it, you might remember the part where Brad Pitt's character gets to Jerusalem and finds that the last city is still standing, and asks how that happened. How is it that this city had a wall built and ready for when the zombies finally showed up? He's told that over time, this city has learned wisdom from previous situations where they were very unprepared. And so they decided to make a change. Given the same information, if 9 of 10 people around the table agree on the exact same conclusion, it's the duty of the 10th person to disagree and take the view that the other 9 are wrong. Often, that's your cyber defender. I've been in these rooms many times, and it's not an easy job, which is why you need to appoint and empower your Churchill or your 10th person. And it's not that you always need to do exactly what this 10th person says, but you need to have that committed viewpoint in the room to explore what that risk is or what that possibility is. You can't have just 10 people all agreeing on the same conclusion all the time. For a second archetype, let's go to the trust guardian. For the trust guardian, we've chosen George Orwell. When we talk about privacy and digital transformation, we're not just talking about compliance checkboxes or consent pop-ups. We're talking about trust, about dignity, about the kind of future we're building. And that's why our archetype for the trust guardian is George Orwell. He's best known for his dystopian novels, especially 1984, where he envisioned a society under constant surveillance. Every action, every word, even every thought was monitored by the all-seeing eye of Big Brother. And really, how far away are we from that today? Orwell wasn't writing fiction to entertain. He was sounding an alarm. He had seen totalitarianism up close. He fought in the Spanish Civil War, witnessing political manipulation, propaganda, and the suppression of dissent. He worked for the BBC's wartime broadcasts, where he saw how state messaging could blur the line between truth and narrative. And he documented the erosion of truth and language in politics and the English language, showing how systemic manipulation happens, not just through tech, but through words. In today's digital world, we have tools Orwell could barely have imagined. Facial recognition, predictive analytics, behavioral tracking, these can be used for good or for control. That's why every transformation team needs a trust guardian. The trust guardian is the one asking, do people understand how their data is used? Have we earned the right to collect this information? And what does this feel like from the user's perspective? They understand GDPR, HIPAA, PIPEDA, but more importantly, they understand people. They recognize that once trust is broken, it's hard to regain, and it can do damage. This isn't just about privacy policies, it's about designing for dignity. Some organizations get it right. Apple, for instance, began requiring apps to explicitly ask users for permission if they wanted to track user activity across other apps and websites, usually for targeted advertising. This caused waves in the advertising industry, but earned public trust. It demonstrated that design choices can enforce privacy by default. Others, not so much. In 2022, the UK's post office website used JavaScript trackers to log people's keystrokes, including what they typed into password fields. All of this without user consent. Even if it was just for debugging, it crossed a line and exposed how easy it is to break trust. When you're building AI platforms, onboarding new vendors, or collecting behavioral data, ask yourself, who and where is the Orwell in the room? Because it takes courage to say, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And that courage is what builds trust that lasts. Let's move to our third segment about the Systems Steward. If you've ever heard the phrase unintended consequences, you're in Rachel Carson's debt. Carson, a marine biologist and science writer, became a reluctant revolutionary when she published Silent Spring in 1962. Her book exposed how the pesticide DDT, once hailed as a miracle, was decimating bird populations, infiltrating ecosystems, and accumulating in human bodies. Before Silent Spring, there were few guardrails on chemical use. Carson showed that intervening in a complete ecosystem without understanding it could cause irreversible harm. That's exactly why she represents the Systems Steward in your transformation team. Today, we often launch new digital systems, AI tools, smart devices, integrated platforms without fully considering how they'll interact, who they'll impact, or what the ripple effects might emerge that are years down the line. And it's hard. It's not easy to anticipate because so many things are changing. It's very easy to say, well, we'll figure it out when it happens, or it's too far down the road to see. But it's still important to have a systems steward who takes it as far as it can go. Carson's legacy reminds us to ask, are we monitoring for second-order effects? Have we designed the system with ecosystems, not just endpoints in mind? And who or what might be unintentionally harmed? She didn't stop with awareness, she took action. She gave voice to public concerns using compelling science communication to reach non-scientists. She challenged powerful industry interests at personal cost, and she ultimately catalyzed the environmental movement, leading to the creation of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. These aren't just environmental lessons, they're transformation lessons. And there are real digital world parallels, and you don't have far to look. One of the most striking modern examples is with the UK Post Office Horizon scandal. Between 1999 and 2015, over 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted based on accounting shortfalls flagged by the Horizon software. In many cases, those shortfalls were later shown to be caused by bugs, errors, and defects in the system itself, not misconduct. These prosecutions destroyed lives. People lost their homes, businesses, reputations, and in some tragic cases, lives. At least 13 possible suicides have been linked to the injustice. Now, the post office, prosecutors, and courts ignored early warnings of faults. They treated the system as infallible. The lesson here is stark. When we build systems that can err, we must build in oversight, error tolerance, and humility, or risk converting tools of service into instruments of harm. In a county in Pennsylvania, a predictive risk model called the Allegheny Family Screening Tool was introduced to help child welfare workers assess which cases to investigate. Again, not bad intentions here, but audits revealed something troubling. If the tool's recommendations had been followed without human oversight, it would have flagged Black children for investigation at significantly higher rates than white children under similar conditions. The reason? Well, the tool was trained on historical data already shaped by systemic bias. Factors like past interactions with social services, zip codes, or income levels became proxies that disproportionately impacted marginalized communities. Now, thankfully, social workers still reviewed each case, and in doing so, they corrected many of these disparities. But it only highlights the one core issue, that without thoughtful design and human guardrails, these systems can amplify harm rather than reduce it. And similar concerns are emerging in other jurisdictions across the US, and they're surmountable. There are things that can change, where child welfare algorithms risk embedding bias. And people are becoming more aware of this, especially when decisions are made based on opaque models or incomplete data. And that's where the trust guardian matters. And that's why it needs to be someone's job, and the systems steward as well. It's not just about ticking compliance box. It's about designing systems that, reflect the values that we choose to uphold: dignity, fairness, and accountability, for instance. So these cases illustrate the cost of overlooking the systems steward. Someone needs to champion sociotechnical foresight, the ability to anticipate the interaction of people, systems, and institutions over time. Carson did that. She paid attention to the quiet patterns, the small changes, the warnings others missed. And so must we. And so must we. So in closing, so far we've met 3 powerful players in our transformation dream team. The cyber defender who fortifies our systems and prepares us for what could go wrong. The trust guardian who reminds us that power over data is power over people. And the system steward who ensures that we're asking what happens next. Not just now. But that magic happens when the 3 roles really work together. So let's take the example of building a smart city and look at how these roles can interact and actually bring things to light. The cyber defender is the first to really raise the alarm. They understand that the more connected a system becomes, the more vulnerable it is to cyber attack. What if someone hacks into the emergency dispatch system, or manipulates traffic signals, or tampers with water treatment? They act fast, building resilience into the design. segmentation between critical systems, zero trust architecture that challenges every access request, incident response plans that are not just documented, but rehearsed. Then the trust guardian steps in. They're not just thinking about data encryption or consent checkboxes, they're thinking about dignity. They ask, will citizens understand how their data is being collected and used? Have we made this system transparent, or is it another black box? Where is the line between services and surveillance, and have we crossed it? They advocate for opt-in models, not silent defaults, publicly visible transparency dashboards, privacy by design across all technologies, from camera placements to data sharing agreements. So when a vendor proposes tracking pedestrian flow for advertising insights, the trust guardian doesn't just ask whether it's legal. They ask, is it ethical, and does it serve the public or just the platform? Then the Systems Steward zooms out, and they look at the entire system and future trajectory. They ask, could AI-based optimization deprioritize services to lower-income neighborhoods? Are we creating feedback loops that entrench inequality? What's the environmental cost of all these centers and servers and data centers? They push for inclusive design, long-term sustainability, and feedback mechanisms that don't just monitor the city, but listen to it. Together, these three archetypes form a trust triangle of sorts, where the cyber defender is protecting the technical integrity, the trust guardian is ensuring ethical transparency and respect for individual rights, and the system steward safeguards the collective impact across time, systems, and communities. One of my favorite pieces there is about the time. How does this look across time? What are the things that are changing? This is one of the roles that, I was so intent on in my last transformation. What is even happening during the progression of the design across multiple systems over time, and how are things influencing each other across systems if you've got more than one thing changing, which most people do? The magic happens, again, as I said, when these roles work in harmony, not as afterthoughts, but as part of the co-creation. This result isn't just an intelligent city then at that point. It's a city that people can believe in and trust. Cybersecurity, privacy, and system design aren't side conversations. They're core to transformation, where the cyber defender is keeping you safe from evolving threats, the system steward is helping you to see the long arc, and the trust guardian makes sure we never lose sight of human beings inside the data. There are so many ways to frame this and position it, and if you've got the right people in there, these roles aren't there just to protect, they enable. Because when people trust your systems, they're more willing to try new things, they're willing to share and adopt and to grow with you, and the system can become so much more than you even started with. Just before we wrap, I want to share one final reflection. Every role we've explored in this episode, the cyber defender, the system steward, and the trust guardian, is centered on care. They're here to protect people, steward long-term value, and build systems we can rely on. But is that always the case? Is everyone out there who has these skills, or everyone who is designing a system that can do these things, designing for care and for trust? Probably not. And actually, we know it's not the case. The same expertise that builds trust can be used to exploit it. So let's meet their shadow counterparts. I've given them names as well. The cyber controller, the shadow of the cyber defender. First of all, they don't just secure systems, they build fortresses of control. Surveillance tools, censorship filters, manipulative network level monitoring. Their goal isn't protection, it's power. They know how to harden an attack surface, but they also know how to lock people in, how to track them down, how to shut them down. Secondly, the consent illusionist, which is the shadow of the trust guardian. They publish privacy policies and add checkboxes and say all the right things, but what they're actually doing is engineering the illusion of trust. They hide manipulative data practices behind friendly UI. They exploit dark patterns, redefine consent until it's meaningless, and extract information without transparency. They don't break trust, they counterfeit it. Thirdly, the systems manipulator, the dark mirror of the system steward. They're fluent in complexity, but they wield it to obscure. Their systems aren't designed for clarity. They're designed for control, for profit extraction, for maintaining the status quo. They rig incentives, mask decisions behind algorithms, make it difficult to challenge or even see who benefits. And because their systems look legitimate, they're hard to question. These aren't hypothetical villains. We've seen versions of them in the wild, like a facial recognition system rolled out across retail environments without clear disclosure, marketed as theft prevention, but used to profile customers without their knowledge. An algorithm used in child welfare systems that disproportionately targets families from marginalized communities in a way that's opaque, unexplainable, and unaccountable. And then on the flip side, we've got examples of trust done right, like Apple's privacy nutrition labels on the App Store. Not perfect, but a real attempt to give people clarity on what's being collected and why. If you're building systems, you're making choices about power, about permission, about people. Every transformation architect, every designer, every strategist needs to be aware of their shadow side. Because if we don't call it out, we risk becoming it. Systems shape societies. Let's choose wisely. Thanks so much for listening to Wired for Change. If you're interested in what's being said in our discussions and conversations and with our amazing guests here on the show, please like and subscribe to support our ongoing content creation and our ability to empower transformation teams and where they cross and come together with society and societal impact and change. Thanks so much again for listening. All the best, and until next time, this is Amy Yee and Wired for Change.